want to tell you a conversation between two guys on a soccer sideline. One of them I'll call Nathan. Sharp guy, engineer, the kind of man who doesn't say much, but when he does, it's precise. Two dads who'd been standing on the same sideline for a couple of seasons. Past the weather, past the scores, into an actual conversation. One day Nathan said something that opened up an evangelism opportunity. He said, "I don't have a problem with Jesus being a real person. I just think the resurrection is where it goes from being history to mythology. That's where you guys lose me." The other guy paused and said, "What if I told you that some of the strongest evidence for the resurrection didn't come from the Bible at all?" Nathan looked sideways. "What do you mean?" "Give me 5 minutes." Top of the morning to you. I'm Brian with Kingdom Family Leader, and this is day 3 of our series, Better Than Going to Church on Easter. Yesterday we talked about the stakes. Today we're slowing down and actually looking at what happened that morning. Not the holiday version, the real one. And we're going to look at it the way a skeptic would, because the evidence holds up. Here's what most people don't know, and honestly, a lot of Christians don't know either. The resurrection of Jesus is not just a religious claim. It is one of the most examined, most debated, and most historically substantiated events of the ancient world. The core facts surrounding the resurrection, the empty tomb, the post-resurrection appearances, and the explosive growth of the early church are not seriously disputed, even by secular historians. What's disputed is the explanation for those facts. But the facts themselves, remarkably stable across hostile and friendly sources alike. Let me give you a few names. Tacitus, Roman historian, no friend of Christianity, writing around 116 AD, confirms that Jesus was executed under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. He also confirms that the movement didn't die with Jesus, it spread rapidly, which, if Jesus simply stayed dead, makes almost no sense. Josephus, first century Jewish historian, also not a Christian, references Jesus twice in his Antiquities. One passage even accounting for later Christian edits confirms the basic historical outline. Jesus lived, he was crucified, and his followers reported seeing him alive afterward. The Jewish and Roman authorities of the time, the very people most motivated to disprove the resurrection, never produced a body, not once. The official counter-story wasn't, "He didn't rise," it was, "His disciples stole the body," which is an interesting response because it concedes that the tomb was empty. Think about that. The people who wanted Christianity dead in its cradle, who had every motivation to simply produce a corpse, couldn't do it. Back to Nathan on the sidelines. The other dad walked him through some of this, the Roman and Jewish sources, the empty tomb, the post-resurrection appearances, not to one person in private, but to hundreds of people, many of them simultaneously in the weeks following the crucifixion. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15 that most of those witnesses were still alive when he was writing, essentially saying, go ask them for yourself. And then there are the disciples. These were men who ran when Jesus was arrested. Peter denied him 3 times before the rooster crowed. They were hiding behind locked doors, terrified after the crucifixion. They thought they believed, and then he was dead. Confusion. That's not a group of men who are going to fabricate a resurrection story and then die for it. People who die for things they believe are true. Nobody dies for something they know they made up. And yet, within weeks, those same terrified and confused men were standing in the streets of Jerusalem, the very city where Jesus had been publicly executed, declaring that he was risen. And they never stopped. Most of them were killed for it. Nathan was quiet for a minute, and then he said, I never heard it laid out like that. The other guy said, most people haven't, because we treat Easter like a holiday instead of an event. Here's what I want you to sit with today. The resurrection is not a leap of faith into the dark. It's a step of faith toward the light. A light that history, archaeology, and even hostile witnesses have been unable to extinguish for 2,000 years. Does that mean that faith isn't required? No. History can take you to the edge of the tomb. It can show you that the stone was rolled away, that the body was gone, that hundreds of people claimed to see him alive. But stepping inside, making it personal, and surrendering your life to the risen Christ, that's where faith comes in. And that's exactly where a lot of men get stuck. They intellectually accept the evidence. They believe it happened, but they're still standing outside the tomb looking in. Like Peter and John on that first morning, they ran to the tomb. They saw the evidence. John believed right there. But Peter, he went home wondering. Same facts, different responses. The question isn't just whether it happened. The question is what you're going to do with it. What's your final response? Today I want to give you something practical for the skeptics in your life. Because after 2 days of sitting with why did Jesus die and who in my life doesn't know where they're going, you might be thinking about someone specific. Someone like Nathan. Sharp, reasonable, evidence-driven. Someone who has written the resurrection off as mythology without ever examining the evidence. 3 names worth knowing: Tacitus, Josephus, and if you want to go deeper, Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict. A former skeptic who set out to disprove the resurrection and couldn't. And I can't leave out Lee Strobel's A Case for Christ, a collection of his studies of old texts and data and stuff an engineer like me likes. You don't have to be a theologian to have this conversation. You just have to know that the story holds up, not just by faith, but by the weight of history. Tomorrow, we're doing something different. We're going to open Matthew and actually read what happened. Not as a history lesson, as a family man, as men leading their households into the most important story ever told. You be blessed.